the ocean was still burning when the Japanese admirals understood that the war had already turned against them. Smoke drifted low across the Pacific like a funeral veil, blurring the horizon where 4 imperial carriers had once ruled the sea. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. Names that only days earlier had symbolized invincibility now existed only as echoes, spoken quietly, if at all. Beneath the darkened water lay steel, fire, and the shattered confidence of a navy that had never imagined defeat on this scale. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stood alone aboard Yamato, his gaze fixed on the scorched emptiness. He did not listen for reports. He listened to the silence. No triumphant signals broke the air. No flags rose. The Battle of Midway was over, but its meaning had only begun to settle. In command rooms and officers' cabins, voices were kept low. Words were chosen carefully, as though a single careless sentence might fracture what little certainty remained. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, the Imperial Navy was no longer asking how to advance, but how it had been outmatched. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi was already dead, having chosen to remain with his burning carrier. Others survived, but survival came with a burden heavier than death. They had witnessed something unprecedented. The United States Navy had not merely struck back. It had adapted, anticipated, and attacked with devastating precision. Captain Minoru Genda, architect of Pearl Harbor, finally broke the silence. They learned faster than we expected. No one contradicted him. Midway was not simply the loss of ships. It was the collapse of belief, the belief that American pilots were inferior, that Japanese doctrine was flawless, that spirit alone could overcome industry and scale. In dimly lit war rooms, maps were redrawn, not with bold arrows of conquest, but with hesitant defensive lines. And in private, the admirals began saying things that would never appear in official communiques. They anticipated us. They baited us. They were waiting. This was not how the war was meant to unfold. That night, as the surviving fleet withdrew westward, Yamamoto dictated a message never meant for broadcast. It was not propaganda. It was confession. We have awakened a navy that now understands us. The United States Navy had not merely survived Midway. It had revealed a new face, one that forced Japan's highest commanders to reassess everything they believed about their enemy. In Tokyo, the truth of Midway was filtered, softened, delayed. But among the admirals, there was no illusion. They gathered behind closed doors, away from junior officers and recorders, speaking with a candor history would only uncover decades later. Vice Admiral Chichi Nagumo, once celebrated, now avoided eye contact. When he spoke, his voice was thin. Their carriers should not have been there, he insisted. Our calculations were sound. Admiral Agaki shook his head. No, he replied quietly. They calculated better. The realization spread slowly, and dangerously. American codes had been broken. If this was true, then the enemy was not reacting. They were reading Japan's intentions before the first aircraft launched. Yamamoto acknowledged the possibility, his expression rigid with restraint. If this is so, he said, then they will meet us wherever we strike. Another admiral noted something even more unsettling. American pilots did not break under fire as expected. They attacked aggressively, sometimes recklessly, but with coordination that suggested discipline, initiative, and freedom of thought. They fight as if they are allowed to think, one officer observed. It was not meant as praise, but it sounded like it. The language changed. The United States Navy was no longer dismissed as inexperienced. It was described as flexible, industrial, relentless. Words once reserved for Japan itself. One remark circulated quietly through the senior staff, chilling in its simplicity: America does not need brilliance. It only needs time. Midway had given them both. As reports were analyzed, patterns emerged. The Americans accepted losses, but traded them strategically. Aircraft were sacrificed to locate carriers. Attacks were pressed even when retreat seemed logical. To Japanese admirals, this behavior was first incomprehensible, then terrifying. They do not fear attrition, Admiral Kosaka admitted. Because they can replace everything. Carrier decks were factories. Pilots were trained at scale. Ships rolled off assembly lines faster than Japan could imagine. For the first time, the admirals spoke openly about production, not honor, as the true battlefield. By late 1942, the warning became reality. Guadalcanal confirmed what Midway had foretold. In one briefing, an exhausted staff officer whispered, "They are learning faster with every battle." An admiral replied, barely audible, "And we are bleeding knowledge." From that moment on, Japanese admirals no longer spoke of victory, but of endurance. They predicted a long war. A losing war. And still, they fought. Something unexpected followed: respect. Captured documents reveal phrases once unthinkable. The American Admiralty shows restraint. Their pilots return for fallen comrades. They do not waste lives without purpose. This respect carried no mercy, but it carried truth. By 1944, the words were unmistakable. We cannot outbuild them. We cannot outtrain them. We cannot outlast them. Midway, they agreed, had been the hinge of fate. One surviving admiral summarized it best: "At Midway, we lost ships. After Midway, we lost certainty." After the war, the admirals spoke freely. And what they expressed was not bitterness, but clarity. The United States Navy had evolved faster than anyone expected. It had turned disaster into doctrine, defeat into momentum. Midway was not the end. It was the beginning. And the Japanese admirals knew it, long before the world did.